details. She knows who Robert Bigelow is.
I know who Bigelow is, yes. Mm-hmm.
I didn't work for him directly. When they had the UFO Research Coalition, I got a grant. And, of course, the money was for Bigelow. And that's what started in 1947. This was before they started putting newspapers online. This is back in 1994, 5, 6, 7. And this is before they started putting these things online. So the way if you wanted to look at newspapers, you had to travel around the country to some of the big libraries, like New Mexico. The library for newspapers in New Mexico was the University of New Mexico. California has so many newspapers that it was split up between a number of libraries, like University of California at Riverside, and then Berkeley, and the California State Library, and the California Historical Society. So I had to visit all of those. And Texas it's a number of libraries, although UT at Austin is the main one, but there's others that have collections of newspapers. And then, of course, the Library of Congress has giant collections. But that's what I was doing. That's doing that kind of thing and visiting the National Archives and looking at government documents. The Air Force Historical Research Agency at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama is another place that I went.
So you were finding the stories that didn't make it into Blue Book and didn't make it past maybe.
Right. Right,
mm-hmm.
And some of the stories are from military men, and they never made it to Blue Book, or
mm-hmm.
they've been lost. This might be interesting. This is things that were investigated by the government never made it to Blue Book in some cases. So, but over the years, Blue Book, but there's Project Sign. When Project Sign ended, they just dumped all the files on in a room somewhere, and they all became mixed up, and then people would come into the room to check something and paw through the files and mix them up, and people probably took souvenirs, and so there's things that have just disappeared from the early files. That if that's not bad enough, that's just one incident. So,
wow.
When Project Blue Book came along, one of the things they did is they got Battelle to computerize their files. And in some cases, Battelle got the only copy of some of the cases that they had. Well, when Battelle got through putting these things on a computer, they destroyed all the files they were given. So that's another place that files were lost. So during its history, the Air Force lost files many times because of starting and stopping and letting the files essentially go to hell, and then picking
mm-hmm.
it up again, and then they have to restart again and refile everything. So it's not unusual that there are a lot of cases that you can find in newspapers by Air Force people at local bases, and they never made it to Project Blue Book, or they're lost somewhere.
Yeah, I worked on a military base, so I understand that.
Yeah.
They have people that I would go into a, I did a lot of mid type jobs, and I'd go into it, and it was like, oh my God, where do I start? And they didn't have any overlap. They didn't have one person leaving to train the next person coming in, because they were on assignment, so they were gone, and you're in, and you're looking at this documentation that's often poor, and so I remember my job, I was kind of faking it because I didn't know what to do half of it, because it wasn't a clear understanding of what we're supposed to do, and we try to believe that our military is efficient, but it's like, yeah, so. That's what I encountered in several departments at this job I had on the base, and I can imagine taking that across the country. So what you're saying is not shocking. It's like, okay.
Yeah, well, I went to a job in Europe, and I knew I was going to be the intelligence sergeant. And I walked in there, and they said, okay, you got to do all this paperwork for the nuclear program. I says, I haven't been trained on this. And the sergeant major looks at me, and he says, guess what? After basic training and AIT, most people haven't been trained on the job they've got. You always get a new job, and he said, this is your new job. I had to burn the midnight oil for a long time to catch up.
I did too. I was a manager, so I know the feeling. I dealt with classified. So all of us got thrown into positions, and it's OJT. Very seldom do you have the officers came to me, and I just had to be smart and do it because and I've seen the same thing, Jan, in hospitals recently. My daughter just died, so when I was over at the hospital, several here in Florida, but the cancer center, they'd bring doctors in from all over the country to work, and they just looked like they were lost. I mean, they know their studies in the cancer business, so to speak, but they'd come on the floors and look to the nurses to train them and know who's on duty and who's off. And I got to learn a lot. But I worked in the military and I worked in the veterans hospitals a lot when I traveled. So I had a corpsman HM2 level, but I also had the security manager position. And because of my background was in investigations, they would just assume, and it's a good thing that I got trained. Janet and I just found some of my old paperwork I sent to my mother. Have you heard of Raytheon and Bechtel? I was working on Spy Wars, Jan, if you've ever heard of that, and I didn't even remember it. Back in the 80s. Right. So when were you in that you were literally on the job in the military?
Oh, 1994, but that's when I got out. I went to Europe in 86, and I was lucky. I had the special weapons sergeant that was there. He had worked in nuclear weapons on every level, from battery level, battalion level, division, and army. He had worked on every level, so he knew. He had a good idea of everything, and he had a reputation. They knew about him in the Pentagon.
Now, how many is in a battalion? Do you remember?
Huh?
How many is in a battalion? How many troops?
Well, I was in an artillery battalion, so, see, we were plussing up. Well, 8-inch battalion usually had, 8 to 12 guns, and we were plussing up to 16. And
now you
so,
said 94. So were you in
that's
Germany?
when I got out.
Did you say?
What?
Were you in Germany? I got out 4/29/93, but my husband got out in 93. Did you go to Germany?
Yeah, I was in Germany for 2 tours and part of a tour in Italy.
So you were in the same time I was. Did you go to Grafenwehr?
All the time.
Holy crap.
Second home, yeah. It's a second home.
OMG. Janet, are you listening to this?
Yeah.
It's a small world, isn't it?
I got off base. I was never in the military. I was civilian working for the military, but I worked on Johnson Atoll, which is a, I don't know, what is the category? Super secret there. So I got some kind of clearance to let me come into the super secret place. And so I actually got out later than you did. I got out in 97. So you guys were there earlier than I was.
Yeah.
And there was some ET shit going on there, let me tell you.
Johnson Island is, I don't think there's anything there anymore, but that was a hairy place.
That's the official story, but I've had some whistleblowers saying, no, they just, it's like an underwater ET joint U.S. military base. So they wanted to up their secret stuff, so they got everybody out of there. There was only 3,000 of us at any time there anyway. It was like the height of the population, about 3,000 people. So they just put out the official story that it shut down. But one of my whistleblowers said, no, they go 13, they go levels down under the ocean, like way deep, 13 levels down or something. And then I thought he might be telling me stories, but he verified that he was there because I said, well, what about this, what about that? So he said, oh, yeah, that's the sharpshoot and this type of thing. Only someone's been there would know the names, right, of the buildings. And even the ruins are there. They took most everything out, but there's still some areas that the ruins. Anyway, so I think it's still a highly active base. And then Dr. Sala in 2009, after Obama got elected for the first term, he published an article that they had a secret meeting like Eisenhower had. And so that was 2009 on Aka Island, which is part of the Johnson Atoll group. So it's so small. Although what's on the surface is really, they could be going underwater. I know there's a lot of stuff underwater.
Well, Tom was in the same artillery. So do you know General Crosby Saint's name, Jan?
Yeah, I know his name, yeah.
Whoa. Now, Jan, that's Tom worked directly for Colin Powell, but before he was under Colin Powell came in later after, what's the real thing? Patton. So you worked under Patton and Powell, didn't you? Did you work?
Yeah. Powell was there when I was there.
So Powell was
my battalion commander. My battalion commander was one of Colin Powell's fair-haired boys.
Okay.
He took a.
Well, Tom was too.
Yeah.
Powell couldn't believe we were working in Iraq and Iran behind the scenes, right? Colin Powell just got in after, what is it, Patton, or what's the other guy's name? Not Patton, the other guy. The fat dude. Right before Powell got there. What was his name?
No. I'd have to look it up. It slips my mind. Powell was there during the Vietnam War.
Desert Storm.
Desert Storm, yeah. My commander had taken an assignment that nobody else wanted. And so, because he had